All right, let's take a look at this particular class here. This is Math 40S Pre-Calc, and this is a course that runs first semester, term 1 and term 2, also has a final exam. And this is how things should be set up to calculate the grade properly in the gradebook. Well, before we take a look at the gradebook itself, just so that you're aware, the course mark is calculated, so term 1 and term 2, the class work is calculated the following way, using these categories. Assignments are worth 15%, mental math's worth 5%, quizzes are worth 15%, and tests are worth 65%. This course, as I mentioned, has a final exam. The final exam is worth 30% of the overall grade. So if the final exam is worth 30% of the overall grade, all of the work that the student completes in term 1 and term 2 accounts for 70% of their final grade. Okay, so knowing that breakdown, let's take a look at the gradebook and make sure that things are set up correctly. So I hop over here to this teacher's gradebook. I'm going to select Math 40S Pre-Calc. I'll select the grade setup icon, and let's take a look at the reporting terms. So in term 1, this teacher set up their class with category weights. Just as I'd indicated, assignments were worth 15, mental math is 5, quiz is 15, and tests are 65%. Now, that's how they had the mark calculate for term 1. What about term 2? Just because you've set up all this category weighting in term 1 doesn't mean that term 2 automatically inherited all of that same breakdown. It was important that however you set up term 1 is how you also set up term 2. So I'm going to just make sure. I'll click on term 2, and yeah, everything looks good. Exactly the same setup. Term 2 is being calculated using category weights, assignments at 15, mental math at 5, quiz at 15, and tests at 65%. All right, now this particular course has an exam. So at the end of the year, the exam was worth 30%, and all the coursework from from September to January is worth 70%. How do we set that all up? Well, you'll notice here in the grade setup that T1 and T2 are or T1 is nested under T2. And that's because the coursework from September to January is cumulative. So term 1 is just sort of a snapshot in time back in November of the student's coursework to date. So term 2 accounts for everything from September to the end of January. So that's their coursework. E1 represents the exam itself. So if your course has an exam, E1 is the exam, and we'll enter that exam mark between January 28th and February 3rd. So how do we get the course grade itself to calculate properly? Well, that's all done inside Y1. And Y1 has to show or has to represent that 70-30 breakdown. Well, in Y1, we're going to use term weights, as this particular teacher is set up correctly, and they're going to set T2 at 70%. Now remember, T2 was all of the work the student has done from September to January, and E1 is the exam, and that's worth 30%. So in this particular grade book, everything's set up correctly. The teacher just has to go in and enter their exam mark from the 28th to the 3rd of February, and we're ready to roll.